LifeLock, how can I help?
The IRS said I filed my return,
But I haven't.
1 in 4 tax-paying Americans has paid the price of identity fraud.
What do I do?
My refund, though.
I'm freaking out.
Don't worry, I can fix this.
LifeLock fixes identity theft guaranteed and gets your money back with up to $3 million in coverage.
I'm so relieved.
No problem. I'll be with you every step of the way.
1 in 4 was a fraud-paying American. Not anymore. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Welcome to the Sportsman's Voice podcast, your inside connection to outdoor legislation. From the Beltway to policy happening your way, we're covering it all. I'm your host, Fred Bird. Join us as we explore public land access, wildlife and fisheries management, Second Amendment rights, the triumphs that shape our nation, the sports we all love, and the stories that fuel our passion for the great outdoors. This is the Sportsman's Voice podcast. Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to this feature edition of the Sportsman's Voice podcast. This is our first actual feature in 2026, as we've been sharing with you over these last many weeks since the new year, our NASC summit conversations, all of those great. We have some more that we're going to release down the line here, but more importantly and timely, we are again coming out the gate here finally addressing the most egregious abomination I have seen in so many years in IP 28. This is we covered this on the roundup yesterday with Marie. She's back with us a week ago. Sorry. A week ago yesterday, and tease this particular show out. So we're going to get into it. Just so many different angles on this, aside from what it is on the surface. We welcome in Amy Patrick from the Oregon Hunters Association. If you follow Amy, you've probably seen her over the years giving her cool updates from her car because she's always working. I appreciate those. I learned a lot from it, but yeah, man, let's get to it. Ladies, welcome. I appreciate you carving out the time and joining us for, like I said, this first feature edition in 2026.
Thanks for making the time.
Thank you.
All right, so let's start out for the listening audience. The face of this, what does IP28 do? And then we'll go into more. And Amy, I'm going to let you kick it off because we've had Marie and I discuss this quite a bit, and I want to hear from you.
Sure. So IP 28 or Initiative Petition 28 it's trying to make the 2026 November ballot here in Oregon. It would basically go into our animal abuse statutes, which I want to point out, Oregon has some of the most stringent animal abuse statutes in the nation. But it would go into those statutes and it would remove the exemptions that protect legal activities from being called animal abuse. And listed in those exemptions of protected activities are lawful hunting, fishing, and trapping, wildlife management practices, teaching and research with animals, all the way down to controlling pests and vermin. So what this would do is by removing all of those exemptions, it would criminalize all of those activities. So you would not be able to trap mice or rats in your home or in any public space like a grocery store or a restaurant or a hospital. Almost 1 million folks in Oregon who hunt and fish would become criminals if they chose to do those activities. It would basically gut our land grant university, Oregon State University, as far as our veterinarian programs that are housed at that college. And in addition to removing those exemptions, they go in and they add to some of the statutes a section predominantly aimed at our animal agriculture sector, where they go into breeding practices, just common breeding practices like artificial insemination. They would classify that as sexual assault. They also remove any of the phrasing that protects good animal husbandry. So, docking tails, castrating, anything like that. So, really aimed at creating what they refer to as a sanctuary state here in Oregon, where it would be illegal to kill or injure an animal for any reason other than self-defense. So the follow-on of that, obviously, is it creates a lot of criminals out of law-abiding folks, and it would absolutely gut Oregon's economy. Beef is one of our top products in the state, and so going in and taking in the legs out of the cattle industry, the dairy farmers, the commercial fishermen and crabbers, you think of all of those industries, it would decimate Oregon's economy.
Marie and I were discussing the other day, and my thoughts, and coming at this from my experience as being a New Hampshire Fish and Game Commissioner for Stratford County, is that you get people in this thread, these extremists come in and just throw everything they can at the wall and see what sticks. And they would come out with the most outlandish ideas, probably knowing that they could negotiate themselves down to their actual intent. Seems like that's happening here, where these folks just really want rid of hunting, fishing, and trapping. But all the rest, and they probably want the rest of this too, because as we'll get into, some of the practitioners of this, the actual people that are pushing this are rabidly vegan and have very extreme motives here. But I think if they got to negotiate down with the citizenry, scaling back of wildlife management as prescribed by the North American model, that would probably suffice them for now. However, through this language constantly coming up and normalizing this conversation, you start to erode and chip away. So you get down the road, you start, this is like 100-year war for them. It's not an instantaneous gratification. It's let's get them little slivers and little death by a thousand cut victories, and then we'll eventually get there. Marie, you were about to say something. I didn't mean to step on you.
Oh, no, you're good, and I think that's a good thread for us to continue on. It does feel like that could be a part of the process, though they've also stated in interviews that they wanna see this conversation keep coming up until it finally passes in Oregon, and then they can spread it across the nation.
Hmm.
I'm curious to see which direction they will go, if they will make some exceptions to try and get it to finally pass in Oregon.
So
Yeah.
go ahead, Amy.
Well, and this is the third iteration of this. So that's one thing that I want folks outside of Oregon to understand too is that this actually came on the scene, I believe, in 2020 or 2021 when they were attempting to make the 2022 ballot. They refiled then when they missed that ballot for 2024 and then have refiled for 2026. So this is the third iteration. Each iteration, we have expected them to kind of do what you were talking about. Like, this is the most extreme. Clearly, they're not getting traction, so they're gonna walk it back. Maybe they're gonna not include, the part about, not being able to trap mice and vermin. Maybe they're gonna walk back some of these, and they have continued to double down and go in the opposite direction, which is an interesting tactic for them. The other thing, though, to your point, of the attrition or 100 years war kind of thing, the main proponent is very outspoken about the fact that they just want to continue to have this conversation, put this in front of people. He has no hope of it passing, even himself. He has said that in interviews, but he wants to continue to put it on the ballot. My biggest pet peeve with some of his rhetoric, and that's saying something when we get into what all is in this, um, is he continues to uh, refer to this in the same vein as the women's suffrage movement, because in Oregon, apparently that had to be on the ballot like 6 times before it passed, and I find that really difficult. It's a major annoyance for me for him to keep continuing to reference that, but that does just indicate how much they're willing to just come back next year and the year and the next time and the next time and continue to push this into Oregonians' conversations.
Not that I'm into giving press to the opposition or name dropping, but we do from time to time. We have to talk about. So I'm just going to come out with it and just talk about this fool now, and then get into the better stuff down the line. So this guy, David Michelson, is the chief petitioner. He wants everyone to be vegan. He wants farms turned into animal sanctuaries. These are his words, not mine. Listen to a brief snippet on a podcast of his that this fella Derek Josie of TD Honest Farming had posted um, back on February 16th, and his big move is towards veganism. Quote, psychedelics highly influenced, pretty big impact on his life. So drugs are playing into this dude's psyche and really motivating him. So I mean, right there, I'm like, this doesn't feel very organic. You're dropping chemicals, and this is the craziness you're coming. I think this gets back to the two fried eggs in the pan for if you're kids from the '80s, and you're like, this is what your brain on drugs. Like right here, this dude's brain on drugs is just absolutely crazy. If you go on their website, and I'm not going to give them the press there. You can go find it yourself. It's an easy Google search. But these people, and this is just to prove again the astroturf nature of this. They are hiring people out at $25 per hour with both full and part-time options. Um, and this came from an August 2nd post of last year when they were hiring people on their Instagram page. Again, you can go find that. I'm not giving them free press on that. So these people and this Michelson fella of the People for the Elimination of Animal Cruelty Exemption, which this turns into the Peace Act for IP 28, they're off their gourd, man. They are just out to lunch, not eating meat apparently. Although most of them, by looks of them, could use a good burger. Um, they're not healthy. They're not healthy physically. They're not healthy mentally, and somehow it's bearing out. And you can see from the astroturf nature of this, hiring people out at a pretty good wage just to collect signatures. They're just going out there with a piece of paper and a pen, being like, "Hey, what do you think of this?" And there's no more conversation being had. Like, "Do you think animal cruelty is bad?" Well, yeah, no kidding. Most people would. What's your definition of it? They're not having these conversations. So you're buying votes, you're buying signatures. Now I know they got to get certified. Marie and I were talking about this. All right, I just said a lot. We can unpack this. What's the current signature count at now as we had it recently, and where they need to go?
So they need 117, 173, I think is the exact number of signatures that they need to make the ballot. They have 105 by their proclamation earlier in this month. Um, According to the Secretary of State, we haven't seen the latest report for this month yet. That'll come out at the end of the month. So their numbers may be accurate. As of the end of January, they had 98,000. So we assume that they are over that 100,000 mark for signatures. Now, with the validation, percentages that you have to factor in, I think they'll probably have to get somewhere around the 140,000 mark just to make sure they've got enough valid signatures to cross that threshold. But they have until July 2nd to collect those signatures. So they're on pace for that.
Marie, thoughts? Again, I just took a whole bunch of time, so I want to have you jump in here before I get into my next thing.
Yeah. I think I agree with you. This whole concept does sound crazy. And we saw in a recent press release from our Oregon Legislative Sportsmen's Caucus co-chair Senator Anthony Broadman pointed out that this is going to impact all livelihoods within Oregon. Also, something just as simple as going to the farmer's market to get locally sourced, nutritious food will no longer be available. So they're taking away resources from people, and also it will increase grocery prices. So by achieving their dream, their pipe dream, now Oregon will have to ship in all of its beef, dairy, pork, chicken. All of that will have to be shipped in from out of state, across state lines. Local farmers markets, that's not going to work any longer, so everything will have to be purchased at the grocery store at a higher cost. So they're chasing ideals while hurting average citizens in Oregon.
It's the thread I want to get to, so I'm going to put a pin in that. What I wanted to get to, and it'll lead into that, is continuing on the money that's getting thrown at this, and conversely, what we're going to have to do should they get these certified votes. So, as of this month, February, you're hearing this on March 5th. It looks like the campaign has raised over $250,000, about $270,000 to support the signature gathering. And we're looking at organizations such as National Animal Welfare Rights Organization, Craigslist charitable fund. I don't. Craigslist can do that. 30 grand there. The PETA people, they're in for 20 grand. World Animal Protection is in it for 11,000. Friends of DED by E, Direct Action Everywhere, 5 grand. Individual donors about $130,000, of which there are 12 larger individual contributions. Haven't really dove into who those folks are, and then roughly 15 grand in smaller donations. It's a shame, like all that money. I mean, whatever, they can raise that money for their cause. But now, if this does get on the ballot and these signatures are certified, now we have to come in, raise this money to have a counter campaign to educate the people on everything you just said. This isn't just about hunting and fishing and trapping. It's about people that have seafood restaurants, that have mom and pops that are, sourcing local Oregon beef, as Amy talked about earlier. The economic impacts of this are wildly, crazily huge on this. So again, you're not just affecting the way American system of conservation funding works with the Oregon Fish and Wildlife or whatever it's called there. Um, this is in totality everything. So now back to my point, we got to spend all this money if we get to that point. I think when you have this basic education, most Oregon folks, I still am messing that up, Marie. I'm sorry. Um, they're gonna look at this and be like, "This is nuts. This is dumb. We're gonna vote no," just because of all this the commonplace problems with this outside of the sporting community. My point being is that the money that we have to raise to fight this could be put into conservation. It could do so many better things, but now we gotta sit there and fight foolishness. And it gets back to my earlier point. Just because people come to the table with a crazy idea doesn't mean we have to listen to it. And I think that's a problem in our politics today. And you've seen this evolution over the last 2 decades. Yes, everyone has a voice. That doesn't mean everyone has to be completely heard. Like, okay, you come to the table with a crazy idea. Like, okay, thanks for your comment. That's crazy, and will screw up the entire community. So noted. We're moving on. But now, because everyone has a voice, this is now turned into everyone has a voice and everyone has to be considered. Their thoughts have to be considered. We can no longer call it for what it is. And then you get back to this negotiating. Okay, this is so crazy. Let's see if we can appease this small, loud group and give them this. No, we're not ceding anything on this. You have to call this for what it is, blackball the hell out of it, and then move on. Like, these people cannot come here with a serious face and be taken seriously. Amy, please.
Well, I'm glad that you called out some of the donors, because I really wanted to call out the Craigslist thing. That is something that took me by surprise, and everybody that I mentioned it to, or they're just like, "What? What Craigslist?" But if you go on Craigslist and you go to the I think it's like in the lower left-hand corner of the screen, there are some little icons, like there's an earth and some animals, and if you click on that, that'll take you through to Craigslist kind of philanthropic arm, which is wildly militantly anti-animal ag. It's extreme animal rights stuff, and so they've been donating to this, and so that's something I've been trying to call out for folks as well because it surprised me. Also, the majority of a lot of these donations are coming from out of the state of Oregon, so we have a lot coming in from New York, California. There's one of those kind of individual donors is a major animal rights person down in California that was trying to get a rodeo. There was a rodeo in one like the Staples Center or something like that, and they were against that. Also, there's about $25,000 that have come in from Russia, which we worked with the co-chair of the Sportsman's Caucus, David Brock Smith, to kind of check in with Secretary of State that was even legal. Apparently it is, but it is shocking nonetheless. And so there's a lot of funds flowing into Oregon from obviously outside of the state. Oregon does tend to get seen as like a petri dish. If we can, again, you reference the this is your brain on drugs. For those of us of a certain age that remember that, we also would remember, Mikey. Mikey will eat anything.
Yeah.
That's kind of Oregon right now. If it'll happen in Oregon, maybe we can do it somewhere else.
Yeah.
The proponent was also really vocal when they first were on the scene about why they chose Oregon. So there's a connection with Colorado. At the same time that the first iteration of this was happening in Oregon, they were also doing one in Colorado at the same time. This gentleman moved from Colorado to Oregon shortly before he filed the first iteration of this initiative. And he cited in an interview that one of the reasons is the demographics of Colorado and Oregon are very similar in that we have a large geographic land space of rural or rural land, but you have a very dense urban center that drives the policy for the state. And so there's a lot of similarities there in how Colorado and Oregon are in that way. Also, Oregon does have the initiative petition process, which not every state does. And our bar for getting something on the ballot is very, very low. It's at 6% of the last votes in the last gubernatorial election. And so that's how you get that 117,000 signature. So those kind of perfect storm of things led to them kind of identifying Oregon as this place to try this out. So I just want to make sure and kind of highlight kind of why they chose Oregon, and then also all of this funding that's coming in from out of the state. I think Oregonians really need to be aware of the fact that this is not indicative of what Oregonians necessarily will think. Um, Also, I just want to share real quick. I ran into a signature gatherer this summer at our Oregon State Fair. Um, and the way they presented this, they had 3 petitions that they were seeking signatures for, and they called us over with 2 other petitions that were very local to the Portland, Salem area. And as they were going through those petitions and flipping through the signature pages, sandwiched in the middle were these orange sheets, and that was for IP 28. And they said, "Oh, and here's a statewide one, and this would end the primate research at OHSU, which is a big deal here in Oregon right now." And they did not expound on that at all. And I happened to see the tagline at the top, and so I knew exactly what it was. And so we proceeded to have a conversation, if you will, for a few moments until my husband was like, "Maybe we should leave now." Um, so they're getting these signatures using paid signature gatherers, as you mentioned. They are using something like, end the primate research at OHSU or end animal cruelty. And nobody's taking a deep dive into what this actually means. And so that I just want people to know Oregon, for all of kind of our reputation, I think, around the country, we're not all like the fact that these guys might actually make the ballot, and it looks like they would make the ballot. They're collecting these signatures under, I would say false pretenses, or not, not saying the whole truth to get folks to sign this.
Yeah, I
So,
think that's pretty standard across the country, especially where you have these ballot initiative opportunities. I think we got like 24 states. If I'm wrong, correct me. It's 24, 26, one of the two. Uh, it makes me think of Maine over here where I'm at. It, Rural Maine, salt of the earth, folks. Hunt, fish, self independence. Take care of yourself mentality. Except Portland. Portland south on the coast and a bit of Augusta, they run the whole show. So you have, I mean, Portland, Maine, Portland, Oregon, it kind of lines up. They're just as crazy over there as they are here. And they bring this crazy crap up. And because the population centers are right there, all the other people be damned. And it's there needs to be a fix. And that segues and where I wanted to go. So at CSF, one of our top 10 priority policies is where we have ballot initiatives to get constitutional amendments specific to ballot initiatives for wildlife management, increasing that threshold. So some of the states, it's a 50+1, a lot of them. We want to see that go to a 2/3. We want you to work for it. If you're going to do this and you really care, you go get that 67%. Um, and I think that would start keeping some people honest. I mean, this guy in particular is just off his rocker. So I think you're not going to weed out those people, but the rest of them, if they have to raise real money, I think that'll be, if nothing, a deterrent for a while. They did this in Utah a while back. It seems to have worked there well. So we want to see that replicated. This also brings up the point of wildlife councils. We saw the great response and the results of the Wildlife Council in Colorado with Prop 127 in the last election cycle. Being able to go to the electorate, I've been stumbling over that word for 3 months, to the people that are going to vote and educating them so that we in the hunting and sporting community are not seeing that stuff. Ideally, we don't see that stuff because that's how these wildlife councils work. That our neighbors and people that don't participate are seeing that they're getting that education. Michigan's the other state out of the 50 that have this and it's worked well. Seems like if our legislative sportsman's caucus and our in-state partners in Oregon could get together on this, a wildlife council would, coupled with a ballot initiative amendment, would just be huge over there. Let me speak to that. You're on the ground there for CSF.
I think a wildlife council would be a phenomenal tool to have in Oregon, especially as we head into November. A big part of this, and something I want to stress, like it is very easy to look at this initiative petition and say that it is crazy and to throw it aside, to ignore it, push it away. If it does end up on the ballot, we can't just have people laugh at it and look away. Like, we are going to have to engage. And part of that is going to be a large educational campaign. And having a wildlife council would add structure to that campaign, like what we saw in Colorado when they had the initiative petition that would have banned all big cat hunting for cougar, bobcat, all of those. Having that wildlife council on hand, they were able to spread the truth about what hunting is, what conservation is, and how hunter utilization of those resources actually can help protect the resource. So that is something we will have to work on, and likely where our money will go should we need a campaign is just towards spreading the message and telling our story, what hunting and fishing and conservation truly is. I do want to turn to Amy too, though, because she has been instrumental in Oregon on starting the conversation around voter reform and making some changes. And she's been a really strong voice for looking at ways to adjust the system so that rural voices are stronger. And I'd love, Amy, to hear your thoughts on the reform efforts you did.
Sure. So, since IP 28 first came on board, to kind of lay the groundwork for this real quick, it's become the galvanizing issue in Oregon, and it's allowed us to form the Oregon Sportsman's Conservation Partnership, which is basically every sportsman-centric group that's active in the state is part of this partnership. We meet regularly. Marie right now is the vice president of that partnership. It got everybody looking up, if that makes sense. A lot of times as organizations, we're kind of siloed, and we're worried about, we're all competing for the same membership. We're all, doing our specific thing, bow hunting, rifle hunting, whatever it is. This was large enough that it got us all to kind of look up from our silos and realize that if we don't start mobilizing and sharing information and really activating together, we are really at risk of losing everything, that we hold dear. So that's been the benefit, or the silver lining of this, is the formation of that partnership. Now, as that partnership has been effective in the last few legislative cycles, we have looked at doing like a right to hunt and fish. So Oregon does not have a constitutional protection. That's another reason why the proponent said he chose here. And so we've looked at doing that. We have attempted to run that through the legislature. We got a public hearing back in 2023 when we had that going forward. But we were not successful in moving that forward. And for anybody not familiar with Oregon's political landscape, we're a super Democrat supermajority in both chambers, and also a Democrat governor. And so it is more difficult to run some of these things through our legislative process. So we attempted that in 2023. In 2025, we chose a broader approach to it. Instead of trying to do a right to hunt and fish, we really looked at what fundamentally could we change in how our initiative petition system is set up that would benefit everybody. Because we had some other egregious issues out here. Measure 110 was the measure that legalized drugs, up to a certain amount. And if you'd ever would have told me that, you could just walk around with drugs in your pocket in Oregon, it'd be fine. That's not something I would ever have believed. But we saw the egregious effects of that, and eventually our legislature had to walk that back.
Yeah.
So, our process, it leaves us open, basically, for a lot of these things to be tried. So we came forward in 2025 with an attempt to change the signature gathering process to increase the number. As I said before, we're at 6% for a statutory change, 8% for a constitutional. So not a high bar as far as the signature numbers. So we wanted to increase those to 8 and 10 respectively. And then we wanted to add a geographic requirement, which would mean that you'd have to gather signatures, at least a certain percentage of signatures, from each of our congressional districts.
Mhm.
And in Oregon, we have 6. And the driver behind that was moving people outside of the Portland metropolitan area to collect signatures. Now, 4 of our congressional districts do touch Portland, so it's not that big of a change. We're basically just asking folks to drive down the I-5 corridor where they can pick up the next 2 congressional districts. But at least it's some kind of a reform, something that means you're having to ground truth this in a proactive way and gather signatures from other areas in the state. Unfortunately, we were not able to get that one pushed through either. And so we're going to continue to work in those veins. But those are some of the ideas that we've come up kind of through the partnership and through working with our legislative partners as well.
Well, certainly it will allow full representation of the entire state. And again, not just letting one urbanized area with the bulk of the population run rural America. And this is the problem we have across the country. There was another point I wanted to bring up. I wanted to know, in Oregon, do you guys have the ability to register voters when they buy a hunting and fishing license, or is that something that could be instituted? Because that, again, where we are working on across the country where it doesn't exist. I mean, you have so many people. The DMV will automatically register people to vote. Health and Human Services for certain things that folks need, SNAP benefits, whatever, like they're automatically registering. And if everyone in the state governments are doing it, we had the same thought. Like, well, if you're going to get a hunt and fishing license, we should be automatically enrolling our community at the very least to vote. Because again, some of the numbers that came out in the 24 election cycle, it's pretty abysmal. Our community that isn't registered, and of the people that are registered, a very small percentage that show up. And we're trying to fight this stuff. Like you said, it's an all-in effort. We need everybody involved, and not these silos, and not this apathetic. Well, I'm just one vote. I mean, 2024 was a good case study of, yeah, I'm just one vote, and your vote and everybody else's vote worked in our favor in Colorado, nationally, Florida with Amendment 2 getting their constitutional amendment. Like, your vote matters, and we need people to show up. Marie, I'm sure you're all over that, getting that legislation introduced, but I didn't want to step on your toes.
So, in the 2025 session, Senator David Brock Smith, the co-chair for the Oregon Legislative Sportsman Caucus, did bring that idea forward of a hunting and fishing voter registration tie-in with the tag system that ODFW has available. That concept needs just a little bit more refining to get the systems in place, but it's something that we have looked at and can continue to pursue.
A big piece with that in Oregon is funding. Just because we'd have to redo parts of ODFW's e-licensing system. And Oregon, for all of our natural beauty, and everybody talks about, Oregon being this wonderful outdoor-centric state, which it is, our legislative body does not prioritize funding of natural resources. So out of our general fund, only about 2.7% of the general fund goes to all 16 natural resource agencies. So when you look at ODFW's budget, obviously, this is something that we all know, right? Hunters and anglers pay the majority of the freight. We're at like 45 to 55% of the budget. And general fund is only about 10%. And trying to claw any more general fund over to ODFW is an incredibly uphill battle. And so I think for that concept to be successful, we've really got to try to find some funding relief for that as well.
Yeah, again, it's a mirror image across the country so much, where so many of these fishing game DNRs are almost exclusively funded for their mission delivery by the sporting community in that user pay public benefits model. Um, and the same thing, you got to claw, plead, beg, and practically get an act of God to get another percentage out of the general fund. And in hell, in New Hampshire, where I live, we have had instances where it's been a while. It's not current, but where Fish and Game did have monies in certain dedicated funds for distribution within their mission, and you had legislators that try to put their hands into that honey pot. Like, whoa, these are dedicated funds, and they would get wind of PR and DJ and how that all worked, and they start coming with their hand out like, no, 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 dog, that's not how this works. You can't. This is earmarked specifically, and you go into the whole rigmarole. But yeah, they don't want to give any money. They want to keep that money for their pet projects. And oh, by the way, can I fleece your account too? No, get the hell out of here, Marie. Please go.
And I think that's something that either the proponents of IP 28 don't want highlighted or aren't aware of. is how the American system of conservation.
Yeah.
Were this to pass overnight, you would lose all hunting and fishing revenue for ODF&W, and as well as that federal match dollars. So overnight, your conservation fund is gone. How are you funding that now when such a little proportion of the general fund is going to ODF&W? And it also would criminalize a lot of wildlife management practices. Like we mentioned when you and I spoke earlier, Fred, there's that coyote in a neighborhood in Salem right now that has bit a woman. Unless imminent threat of death is available, there's nothing that could be done to deal with issues like that when those conflicts arise, and also not the money to do it any longer should that pass.
That's the crazy paradox in all this, right? Especially with these eco well, I'm gonna walk. They walk right up to the line of eco terrorists because even on their webpage, and they talk about how to walk back or deal with the other side. They go into the whole thing of they walk right up to the line of nonviolence, but they seem to be reading into this on their own words that they're cool with violence and radical property destruction. But let's just walk up to that. It's on their website. I'm looking at it right now. So anyway, the paradox is they claim to love the environment and want these animals to flourish. They either are wildly ignorant on purpose of how those animals do survive because of wildlife management based in science, or they just truly don't care and this is just a pet project for them. They just want total control. Either way, they're completely disingenuous because if they did care, they would educate themselves and understand how this works. And without that fish and game department and those scientific professionals that they hire and vet, no one has anything beautiful because eventually, as we know, disease, famine, you got fragmented but you guys got some big space, but it's not all contiguous and especially where you have, half the damn state's desert or close to it, and the other half is rainforest, and that's where your population centers are. So there is huge fragmentation. Like if you don't have that management, no, it doesn't balance itself out. You don't have this rewilding effort and the people that have this fantasy of that, you would need to extrapolate human beings from the landscape in totality, not just in Oregon. And then still the effect of man over thousands of years, you'll never get back to that utopia you think you want. And so they're counterproductive to their own movement.
Absolutely. There's not much that makes sense, honestly. There's not a lot of, intellectual continuity, if you will. But once you start diving into this, the other interesting choice that they've made that I want to call out real quick too is they don't have any exception for our tribal partners. And that is a question that's right there on the website that they talk about, and not having any carve out for the sovereign tribes for sustenance or ceremonial use outside, obviously, of any sovereign land. But we have multiple tribes in the state of Oregon, many tribes in the state of Oregon that don't have land allotted to them. And so this would affect our tribal partners as well. And so I think that's an interesting choice that they've made.
I'm gonna have to go chew on some mushrooms, I think, to get to where this Pat and his ilk are. Because I mean, obviously, he said that's where what got him there. I'm kidding. I'm not gonna eat any mushrooms.
I saw in an interview that he did once where the interviewer lightly touched on wildlife management and the changes that would make, because it would criminalize a lot of ODFW's current practices. And he said that necessity drives innovation, that he doesn't have a solution for wildlife management, but that when they no longer can use those tools, it'll drive innovation for new tools. So there is no like they recognize there are holes, and their solution is innovation will come.
Well, maybe if he can convert these cattle farms to annual animal sanctuaries, maybe all the wild critters will recognize those political boundaries, and they can all live together and make mushrooms. Maybe that.
Well, and it's funny that you meant the whole mushroom thing, because also one of the things we haven't touched on is that in this iteration of this idea, they have a transition fund that they have added to all of this, that they want to help farmers transition to these more humane practices. And one of the examples that they use is chicken farmers being able to convert their barn system to grow mushrooms. Maybe that's a little self-serving on his part, and maybe he just wants some more mushrooms. But in one of the same interviews that Marie was talking about, the interview asked that, how would that be funded? And the generality is, well, it's got to be state funded. It's got to come from the general fund. But he's not It's not really sure how much or how that would happen. And as somebody who's in the Capitol right now, as we're dealing with budget shortfalls, here in the state, and the legislature is trying to balance our state budget, um, the the inability, and we just talked about, trying to claw back some general fund for natural resource agencies. This magic thought that, well, somehow we'll just find tax dollars to, help with this transition fund and, do all these things is just yet another example of how out of touch the folks that are behind this are with actually how things work in the state, whether that's economically, legislatively, on the ground with wildlife. There's just a disconnect that's staggering.
And that's part of it too. Like, have the intellectual integrity of this, and they just clearly do not. And it falls short, their arguments. And again, I come back to what we opened the show with is just throw enough crazy stuff at the wall and see what sticks and just keep going until you get where you need to go. All right. So I want to wrap because I've taken more time than I asked for on this show, but again, we could go for probably another hour on this easily. In short, let's wrap it up. Cliff note versions one more time, what this does, who this affects, and then what are next steps for people in Oregon and people outside of Oregon help, and how can they do that?
I think the easiest cliff note to describe it is that this would create a sanctuary state in Oregon where it would be illegal to kill or injure an animal for any reason other than self defense, while also criminalizing ranching and farming. So it's going to affect every Oregonian. It's going to affect those who hunt and fish, but it's also going to affect those who are ranchers and farmers, all the way down to anybody who has no connection with the outdoors or with farming or ranching. But you're not going to be able to trap mice or vermin in your house. You're not going to be able to shop locally for your proteins. Your prices are going to increase here in Oregon. Your tax liability may increase because as we see these economic drivers get decimated by this, that's going to reduce the amount of obviously general fund. So you're going to have less services available to you through the state and also likely have additional tax burden. So obviously it's going to touch every Oregonian on this. What we've been promoting at this point, because this is part of the democratic process, right? A lot of people are just hearing about this now, they're like, what can we do? How can we stop this? The reality is we can't. This is the democratic process. They have the right to gather these signatures and try to put an idea, however weird, on the ballot. And so we have to let that process play out. But we have to be prepared then to lean into that process, if they qualify for the ballot. And the way I've been encouraging folks to do that now is, one, spread the word, make sure people really understand what this would do and how it would touch every single Oregonian. And two, register to vote.
Yep.
We have to register to vote. And then three, when this makes the ballot, I want to hand it the biggest defeat we've ever seen in Oregon. I want to make a statement with this, right? So that's what I have been asking, our membership and those who've come to me and said, well, what can I do right now? Well, that's a difficult question for the right now. But what we have to do is be prepared, register to vote, and then hand this the biggest defeat we've ever seen. We really need to make a statement as Oregonians on this.
Absolutely. How can folks get involved with the Oregon Legislative Sportsman's Caucus? Highlight the leadership there, both the House and the Senate, and I'll let you take it from there.
Yep. And I think too, just to add on Amy's as well, and I'll go to how to get involved there. As frustrating and wild as this concept seems, I feel like this is a real opportunity. This is an opportunity for us to tell our story, to really share what hunting and fishing and sportsmen's conservation is. Share the North American model, and also for us to start getting involved. Hunters and anglers, I've long said, are a community that likes to go in the woods, be left alone, and live their lives. This is our opportunity for us to step forward and show how many of us there are, how amazing the collective of people that are in the sporting community are as well, and also to start reaching out to legislators so that they realize we do have a voice, and it is a strong voice. It's just that we tend to stay quiet. There's opportunities to reach out to your legislators. We've got our Legislative Sportsmen's Caucus. There's also opportunities to get involved with the organizations that are members of the Oregon Sportsmen's Conservation Partnership, OSCP. That's our coalition of all the member groups. You have Oregon Hunters Alliance, Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership, Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation, Ducks Unlimited, Oregon Trappers. There are so many groups. We also have Northwest Steelheaders. All of those groups have come together to work for this. So by supporting all of our member groups and our website, Fred, I can get that to you to be posted.
Yeah.
You can see our website, see who those members are, see which groups are active, and support their efforts. Because if it does make the ballot, our groups will have to put in money for that educational campaign.
Yep.
It will. I see it as the greatest opportunity for R3 we've had in a while.
It's a great
Strong R3 effort.
Yeah, no doubt. I like that spin on it, and I mean it's not really spin, but it's just there's a silver lining, and let's go ahead and tap into that. I think you're exactly right, Marie. I like that a lot. Closing thoughts, Amy?
Gosh. We're not all crazy in Oregon. Please, those of you who are outside the state, just know that this is not indicative of the Oregon way. I think what you'll see if this makes the ballot in November, I'm hopeful will be more of a statement of what Oregon thinks about our heritage of hunting, fishing, farming and ranching as a Western state that is ingrained, in us. And so I hope that my fellow Oregonians will rise to the challenge and show up in November and really make a statement that the rest of the country can lean into as well.
Mm-hmm. Marie?
I think I love to look for the silver lining. This is the opportunity, if it does make the ballot, to defeat it with such a wide margin that we send the message that our heritage and our traditions are important and they are valued even in a strong supermajority state like Oregon.
I think I've settled, and I've kind of been like this. My whole profession really is, have your opinions. I can't do anything about that. We can't do anything about that. You're welcome to them, no matter how crazy they are. But what I can abide is somebody or somebody's attempting to be totalitarian dictators and forcing the rest of us to comply or subscribe to their, fringe ideas and unproven models, or they didn't, like you said earlier, they don't even have a model to consider. So yeah, we're not going to fly by the seat of our pants on this one here. I thank you both for your time. Again, I know we have other thoughts on this, but I want to be respectful of that time. So we will catch up for sure. We'll get updates. If this does indeed get the signatures, we'll do another round of this, and we can get folks activated, like I know we all can do, and we saw again in 2024 in Colorado for sure. So thank you both very much. Appreciate it, and we're fighting the good fight. Thanks for joining us on this edition of the Sportsman's Voice podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, your support is crucial, and you can help us out right now by leaving a review, filling in those 5 stars where available, sharing this episode with friends and family, and engaging with us socially. CSF can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and X, formerly known as Twitter. Together, we can protect the outdoor sports we love and continue to keep you informed wherever you are. That's it for this week. Until next time, we'll see you later.